Hello Web, this is Dante's Inferno, and today I've been, kind of bored. I've just been hanging around the house. I went for, a walk for a few miles, came back, really didn't have much to do, so I don't know, I just was playing on the computer, and I decided to, kind of design a game, and so I want to share that with you and see what what you think, or if you have any suggestions. I don't know, and I've been putting this together, and it's actually, I think it's kind of coming out pretty unique. And so I was trying to use something. At the moment, I just have a character sheet that I had put together, and the idea is, with the character sheet, design the rules to go around the character sheet, and then design a setting. And the character sheet, I think, has been coming out pretty interesting. I kind of like it, and so just want to show you what you think. And this is pretty much what I've designed. I know a lot different than probably anything that you've seen before, and that's really what I was going for. Um, I was trying to move something a lot more unique than really anything that I have. And so I just want to point out a few features on here. Now, this was supposed to be designed as a very generic style of a character sheet, that could be fit into any style of game, maybe fantasy, um, modern, any type of game, and then to allow then just create the setting as I create, the rules to it. But I think it's coming out pretty well. And again, I've just been, spending a couple hours on this. I haven't spent really that long, designing it, and I feel like it's, kind of coming together pretty well. So let me just kind of show you what I've got. Okay, so let you kind of take this in for a moment. Just kind of see what I've got. What No, it doesn't show up on camera very well. But I'll just go from the top. Basically, the top it says character information. Notice I got no rule of the game system. I haven't really made it up yet. Next I've got character information. So next I got name. Under that is race, because again, I got to set up where it could fit into anything. So next is race. Next is class concept. Ideally, just a clever way of saying what your class is. The reason why I wrote class concept, because if you're doing more of a if you're doing a fantasy game, then having like things like barbarians and wizards and sorcerers and that kind of thing is pretty important. But if you're doing more modern, it could be it could be police officer or firefighter, or it could be more of a job. So I tried to make it very universal, wording. But in essence, it just basically means what your job is. It's a real clever way of saying that. Next is personality alignment. Again, it's more of a universal way of just adding an alignment. I haven't really decided what type of alignment system I'm going to use. If it's going to be something more like along Dungeons and Dragons, or if it's going to be completely different. If it's just going to be more simplified, just like black, black, white, gray, or just evil, good, neutral, or something of that nature, or if it's going to be more like in the White Wolf design, where it'll be actually characteristic quirks. But ideally, the point of it is to give a way for the whole point of really alignment is for two things. One, so that it becomes role playing. So the player is taking the role of another character, and they have a set of guidelines that they can use. But the most important part of an alignment is so that the storyteller understands where the character is going with this. So if so they're not surprised. If for instance, if a character picks like chaotic evil, the storyteller knows, okay, I just can't put him alone with the king because this guy's going to murder him. It gives the storyteller a understanding of, or GM understanding of, where the player is deciding he's going to take his character. So, that can be kind of like an important thing to do, and how detail oriented I'm going to make that. I'm not, at this point in time, I don't really know. But I left it in there because, and then next is character level. Again, I'm not really exactly sure how this is going to fit in, but I could see different ways I can, do that. It's something small. I can remove it or change it, whatever. Next, on the other side, is now this is going to come into play when we get over to here to explain why this is. But basically this says is attribute traits order. Attribute traits order. And I'll explain much more detail on what this is. And matter of fact, let's just explain this now. This right here is your attributes. This is your stats. This whole thing, this is your stats. So ideally, each little chunk of this pie is going to represent like a die type, and you're going to have to divide them up between 4 attributes, which is the attributes are going to represent every type of dice roll that you're ever going to be doing in the game. And so when you break it down to it, in my opinion, there's really 4 different types. You have your physical, you have your social, you have your mental, you have your social. Did I say that right? Physical, mental, social, and then the last die type would be perception. I might have said social twice. I hope I'm not gonna have to figure this out with. Yeah, but that's what I designed it for: physical, mental, social, and perception. So that's gonna, determine every type of dice roll that you're ever gonna have to make in this. And so ideally, what you do is you put in order what your strongest is, what you're strong to your weakest. So in the vocabulary I'm going to use is physique to represent your physical. That's going to represent your strength, your dexterity, your endurance, anything that has to do with physical. Your social is going to represent anything from like intimidation to persuasion to anything that involves social combat or just social roles. And then your mental is anything that has to do with just mental, your research roles, your raw intelligence, and I'm probably going to call that intellect. So I'm thinking I'm going to go physique, mental. Well, let's go physique, intellect, social, and I don't know. I'm still thinking about perception. So I'm thinking that's how I'm going to do. So, and what you do is you basically put those in order based on how strong you're gonna be on them. Like how well, like for instance, if you want to make this a big barbaric brute. Now I haven't really figured out like any type of limitations yet, how far it's going to go, but basically within the dice. So basically, let's just put on here. So physique, I'm going to put on top. Okay, so I just wrote pH because, all right, we're going to just go physique on top, and then let's go, I don't know, let's go perception. Let's say I'm making like a barbarian style character. So next is going to be perception, and then next is going to be social, and then next will be and then the last will be mental. Okay, so basically I just jotted down real quick, and so basically I really want to make a physical character, so try to work this out so you can see it. Okay, so I really just want to make a physical character, so I start off on here, and This would represent, you know, your D4. This would be your D6. This will be your D8, your D10, and then D12. And you can't, obviously, you're not going to want to go high. You can't go higher than D12, and that's going to be like the max this physical chart can actually take. And so I decided, yeah, that's what I want. So all the, well, let's do a different color. So all this will represent, you know, my, you know, physique. This is all my physique. And so I'm going to have a D12. And I'm not sure if this is how I'm going to actually have it fill out, like using different markers. Or if, you know, they just write in, you know, physique, like right up here. But this is all this on this chart. And now the one rule I'm going to do is you have to have at least a D4 in the other attributes. But that only leaves, you know, that leaves everything else a D4. So the rest of my attributes are in fact just a, you know, a D4. So if you want to do, you know, different markers, for instance, and again, if this is how I'm going to do it, I'm not exactly sure. So, or if I'm just going to actually physically write the stuff in, but then these will represent, you know, and that's really is, you know, where the max that you can go. But let's say, for instance, you know, I want to be more of a balanced character. It would work out to where, you know, my physique is D4, D6, and this is my physique, and that's, you know, D6. Then my perception will be, you know, D4, D6. So we have perception D6, and then my social is going to be, you know, a D4, D6. So that works out, and then my mental is going to be D4, you know, D6. So all my attributes are now, well, I should have used a different color. So now all my attributes are, you know, they average out to a D6. And what this does is this determines what die type, you know, all my rolls are going to be. And so it's really up to you to decide, you know what you're going to end up doing. And so it's by doing this, and this is what I kind of found looking at this, you could pretty much set your character any way you want from the beginning. I mean, there would be no dice rolling involved. There would be, I mean, it would be perfectly fine for you to max your character out, because by maxing your character out, you're going to be lower in other areas, which are going to, going to affect you. So, right from the beginning, you can already set your character any way you want. So, I thought that was actually kind of a really neat idea, and something that, no one else has really done before. Now, let's talk about on the bottom, the skills. So the skills are going to represent where the physical attributes represent, well, I shouldn't say physical, but where the attributes represent your dice type, the skills are going to determine how many dice. So let's say I want to, I want to have, I want to point out the skills are going to be really based on the setting. If we're doing more of a fantasy style setting, I'm going to have a list of skills that really are being used for the fantasy style setting. If we're going more modern, it will be a different set of list. So the skills will actually determine the type of world that. So how detail oriented the skills are at this point, I'm not really sure. But let's just for instance, we're just doing like a fantasy style. So and let's go real kind of generic with the skills. So let's go like, I don't know, melee combat. So basically I write the skills melee. Now I can go much more, detail oriented, and I can go swords if I want to. Just write swords. Okay, just write swords. So, and then the skill type is going to determine like how many dice. So maybe a swords plus 4. So notice I wrote it in red. And again, I don't know if I'm going to have these different color coded, but the idea is you wouldn't even really need to write the names of the stuff down. You just kind of fill in the pie chart if you're doing color coded, and you could determine 2 is like a D would be equal to a D6. So I'd roll 4d6 and that's how I would do the roll. And I'm thinking about probably doing a wild die involved with it, just to represent, you would need at least an unskilled, because in the event of an unskilled roll, what would you roll? So ideally, I guess the wild die would represent your physical, your physical die that comes with, and then the other ones would be, so the swords would be your physical die, so you'd at least get 1 in that. And then then you add your skills, so it'd be like 5 dice, so you would roll 5d6. And with the dice type, I'm thinking the way I want to do it is I'm thinking I want to go the highest die roll. Alright, I'm thinking the highest die roll depending on what dice, but if you have pairs, you can add those together. So there would be a little bit more of a strategy. You're not going to just roll 6. You might roll 3, 4 2s, and so that would be an 8. So you could you can take the 8 instead. And in the same token, I'm thinking if maybe if 1 comes up, it takes away your highest die. You can keep the 1 on, but it'll take away your highest die. And if you have nothing to take away, then in fact it would be like more of a botch or something like that, or some sort of dramatic failure. And mathematically, I'm not really sure that could possibly come up. Maybe I better do something with the wild die. If that comes up as a 1, then it's it's like automatic failure, or something of that nature. Next, I've got, so ideally the skills can be as detail oriented. I haven't really decided, because that's more something when I start designing a setting. The skills are what's going to be important to maintain that style world. So if I'm doing more of like a steampunk style world, I'm going to want like steampunk style skills. If I'm doing a Wild West, it's going to be more focused on Wild West skills, and it's going to that's what's going to keep the characters from really just expanding beyond that world, is they're going to have like a limited skills that they can do based on that, and that will help create the world. Now the next part of it, while I think is kind of a cool idea, I really haven't put as much time with, but I kind of like the concept behind it. So I think it's kind of worth checking out and looking at. So let's see if we can get a closer copy so you can see all this. Now this big chart right here is going to represent your health, your defense, your speed, and your psyche. Now ideally the psyche and the health are the same thing, but where the psyche is going to be, when it comes to mental damage, the health is going to be physical damage. So ideally, and then then the health is broken up into lethal and non-lethal, and I'm thinking I'm going to allow the players to decide. Let's take the first box. So the first box, I got health, and it's going to have like a total, like there's going to be a value. So let's say, for instance, and how I'm going to reach that value, I'm not really sure. It's probably going to be determined by the level, and maybe like the the class, so that's probably what's going to determine the health, and it could actually end up determining what can determine that is, this chart here could have a big part of that as well. Like if I want to do solely out the chart, I could go, the die type times 10. So with D6, that would be equal to 60 health points. I could do it like that, or I could do it maybe based on the level. So at level 1, you maybe only have like a D6 worth, and then as you go up in level, you can gain more you know, ideally you can gain more. Now, ideally this isn't going to really change unless there's some sort of power or some sort of skill or some sort of, you know, equipment that would change this. This is just your raw stuff. This is probably going to stay the same unless over time maybe, you know, you start losing in physical, but maybe you start gaining mental or something of that nature. So that's basically what. Oh, I'm sorry about that. My camera had turned off. So basically, where I last left off was to kind of describe to you the health. And so the total is going to be right here. Now, how I'm going to determine how to get the total, I'm not exact, you know, I'm not really sure how I'm going to get that. But it could be based off your, you know, off this little pie chart. I could have it based off your concept and your, you know, your class and concept and your, you know, your level. And this could, you know, very well, excuse me, this could very well affect that as well. So, but then you're going to have a total here. So let's just, you know, just whatever. Let's just put like 60. Now, however I got that total. So we got 60. Now, on the bottom, I have lethal, and under that I have lethal and non-lethal. So pretty much at this point in time, I'm letting just like the character decide how much they want to put of this health into the lethal and non-lethal. It very well could be too that, you know, I probably at the moment I thought, like, you know, maybe putting 40 down for lethal and then 20 for non. So basically, you know, the idea is, you know, you could take a knife, but maybe you got a glass jaw. And so, but, you know, another way I could do it is, you know, having two different, you know, when it reaches 60 in either or, if you get 60 in lethal, you know, you're dead. If you get 60 in non-lethal, you just fall unconscious. That's, you know, now I think about that might be a better way of doing that and to utilizing the health. Um, so actually, you know, I'm starting to think that's probably a better way. Originally, I thought maybe, you know, splitting them up, what the health is equal to. So next to that is, and right here is defense. And exactly how I'm going to determine I'm not really exactly sure. But off to the side I have dodge and I have damage soak. So representing the dodge is basically what you need to get, you know, in order to actually be able to hit, or how much dice you're going to be able to have to be able to actually dodge. And that determines, it's going to really determine, do you want dodge to be an actual action, or should dodge be a, you know, some target that you have to hit, you know, such as you know, armor class, like for the D20, or if it should be something more along the lines is, you know, you have to declare that you're dodging, so therefore, you know, how much dice do you get to do that, to actually do that. So that could be based on what it is, or it could be just maybe a target number. Now again, the dodge might change. It might be something like just avoidance, or, you know, something of that nature. I just try to pick up something really quick. Now damage soak, obviously that's going to be more towards, like, it's going to be a damage reduction, or it's going to be some sort of like dice rolling that's involved into, you know, soaking up this damage to prevent you from dying. Now that's going to be important, you know, based on how lethal I want the game to actually be. If, you know, I keep the health low, I'm going to want to raise the soak. If I keep the health high, I might want to lower the soak, because it would actually determine the speed of the combat, how long combat is, you know, ideally how long it's going to take. You don't want to be hacking. Ideally, you know, whatever you do for yourselves, you're going to also want to do for the enemies, and you don't want to be hacking them for 20 rounds over some mook. And, you know, you don't want to be, you know, so lethal that it takes one round and, you know, you're cleaved in half. So that's going to really help determine the lethalability of the game, and the just, you know, the speed of it as well. So ideally it would be something like where, you know, it's split in half. You have so many points, you know, in which to that you can split it up. So you maybe, you know, let's say, like you know, for some reason you get 10, and that'll probably be based on this somehow. So you got 10 points. So, you know, maybe you put down 6 plus 6 and maybe a plus 4 for damage soak and a plus 6 for dodge or something like that. So then that would determine, you know, you would have to split it up between those two. So the idea is, are you a walking tank, or are you just, you know, a Jedi Knight dodging everything, you know? So that's really determining what it is. Do you want to be void getting hit, or do you want to soak up the damage once you've gotten hit? So that's really, you know, how I'm going to kind of base that. And I'm not really sure if I'm going to keep that as a total or if it's more of like a dice pool. Now next is speed, and speed is, you know, right here. And so, and it's going to kind of work similar in the same way as like the defense, where you have to split it up between initiative and movement. So you're going to have to give up. Do you want to go first but be able to move farther, or do you want to be able to go, you know, move slower but be able to move farther? I think I just repeated that. So, or do you want to go first and not move as far, or move farther and, you know, not get as much the initiative? So like it might be, speed might be like, I don't know, let's say for a second somehow I work it out where it's 8, and then you're gonna, you know, uh, so 3, 5, you know, representing how many speed, maybe the movement represents the amount of spaces that you can actually move. Um, and then the initiative could be maybe like adds to the dice roll, or the amount of dice that you were to roll at this point in time. Again, I haven't really spent a lot of time on this. I'm just kind of, you know, really just kind of playing around. Now the psyche, I think, is a, you know, great thing here too. So I'm just gonna, for the psyche, let's just determine that, you know, the psyche is like 20. It'll probably be based off of the chart too. Um, so the idea, it would be the same, it would be the opposite end as the health. So basically I have, you know, I have psyche. This is what this chart says right here. It's this thing psyche, and under top of that I got willpower, and next to that I have insanity. So the willpower is going to represent temporary damage, and this is what, you know, damage is. The psyche is, it's going to be mental damage, your mental damage that you've taken. So willpower is going to represent temporary damage, and the psyche is going to represent, you know, more permanent damage. And the way it's going to happen is willpower will be able to regain quicker, and psyche's insanity is going to have to be regained at a lot slower rate. So where you gain 1 point of willpower per day, psyche might be 1 point of willpower per month. And so you're dealing with, you know, it's much more slower. And ideally, you know, the same thing as if, you know, this goes to 0, you know, your mind's like pretty much, you know, fried either way. Or it could be based on a test. Maybe it's something like, you know, maybe it's something like intimidation. Someone's trying to intimidate you, so then that could actually damage you mentally. So that's where it might be, you know, in your best interest, where if you make this big brute and he's got like a, you know, his chart goes all the way around, and he's got like a D12, but then all his rest of stuff's at a D4, he might be really physically strong, but man, mentally, you know, you could tear him apart. And so that's where that's going to come in. Either, you know, you can dominate him, you can control him. Maybe he's just not very intelligent. You know, you can intimidate, you can get under his skin a lot easier with that. So that's where that's kind of really kind of based off of. And it's going to work on the same way as basically health, but it's not supposed to be as severe. You know, it could be something like where, you know, you're trying to intimidate this guy, and so you roll your intimidation and you cause damage, but it doesn't damage him, you know, physically, it damages him mentally. So it will go after maybe his willpower. If you get him down to 0, man, he's telling you everything you want to know. And then the insanity is going to be much more severe stuff. So maybe you start taking damage over time, where after you're battling people and you're going months of battling, it's just really draining on your psyche, and it's just really messing you up. And then over time that could be a lot more serious. Or if you see some sort of creature and it's just ripping heads off of creatures, maybe that really just messes you up, and so it might go off your insanity. It could take, in that instance, it could probably take months to regain those points back. And so the idea of the thought would be insanity would take a lot longer to regain back than willpower. Willpower will gain back maybe after a good rest, or one night's rest or something like that. Insanity might it could take months to regain back. So that's really what I've got here. And then obviously I know you can't see this very well, but because of the text I was using, I'm surprised it's not really showing up. But what this says right here is skills. And so basically, based on the the campaign that you're doing, you'd write down the skills, and then this would be the amount of dice that you would add to it. And okay, so basically what I'm kind of thinking about with the dice rolling is, I think I talked about this earlier, but what I'm going to go with the dice rolling is, and this is where I'm going to have to do some playtesting and see if it works. I'm thinking about just when you roll, you go off your highest, your highest total, which could be two things. One, go off your highest die, or two, you use high combinations. Like you can add things that are the same together. So basically, if you roll this, a 6. Let's say you roll 5 dice. You roll a 6, and the rest are 2s. You can either A, take the 6, or B, add all the 2s together, and then that would be 4 2s. That would be 8. So then your dice roll would be, in fact, it would be 8. And then based on that would be the your difficulty number that you would set. That way it would keep it kind of low, but then it would also make it it would make skills much more important. Ideally, someone with the high attribute in the skill that they're using with the high skill would be the most ideal thing to get. So let's say you're sword fighting with a guy who has a D12 for physique, and you've got a D6. But you're just a better sword fighter than him. Maybe you've got like 8 dice with your D6, and he's only got 2. So there's probably a good chance you can actually roll higher than him. But then there's also a good chance that if he rolls 2 12s, he's going to completely smoke you. So it's going to be a very give and take type of system based on your physical attributes, or just your attributes that you're combining with your skill and your skills. So it makes skills quite important. So even if you're rolling a bunch of D4s, you could get where, if obviously rolling D4s, you have a 1 in 4 chance of rolling a 4. So let's say you roll that, and all your 4, you just rolled like 5 4s. 5 4s come up, which is really unthinkable to actually do. So that would come up to be a 20. But in the same token, someone who rolls 3 10s, if they 2 10s come up, that would be a 20 as well. So it's I'm gonna have to really play around to see how the dice rolling works, but I'm thinking that's kind of more of the unique way of doing it, and probably one of the more simpler ways of doing it. But I'll see based on that. Now I'm thinking about with races. What my plan is to do with races is maybe like the race will, let's just take for an elf, for instance, maybe like an elf will have a higher mental, but they will have lower in physical, so they're capped and in the physique, but they're raised in mental. So how will that work? Well, when it comes to mental, instead of starting at a D4, you would start at a D6. So by doing that, your value would be actually, higher when it comes to that sort of thing. And then capping it would maybe, you can't, the max you can get is maybe, a D8 or something like that. Um, or something of that nature. So ideally, you don't want to go beyond like a D. You don't want to really go beyond a D12. So at some point, I'm gonna have to put like a cap on maybe like the highest you really can go for like a human is like maybe a D10 or something like that. And then I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that. That's really going to be based on setting. If I do more of a modern style setting, I may not have to worry about races. But this is more of a generic style system. Putting this little border around, I gotta admit, was kind of difficult for me to do. The thing was when I originally printed this character sheet, and I might have some copies. Just want to show you like the different types of examples that, and I want to point out like I had talents and specializations. So I have made some changes, and here's like another draft where you can barely read, anything. And I got a few more, but I was kind of, playing around trying to get it to work. And in this one, you can't really tell, but this is all printed like in blue. Maybe you could tell a little more. So, I was playing with different color schemes, and things, for the back, because obviously got the, the back of the character sheet. What would I need to put on there? Well, a few things I probably could put on there is maybe like a Merits and Flaws style system, or like an Edges style system. I mean, that would be kind of unique if I had like a way to be universal with all the other D20 systems out there where the edges would actually come into play. That way you can utilize the other books. But I'm not really exactly sure what other things. But and other things could be racial traits. Equipment obviously would be a good one for be on the back of it. I definitely don't have any space for equipment. So far, I mean, it's kind of coming together, and was really based on again, I'm just trying to create a character sheet, and then I can kind of create a rule system, and then create the setting. That was really my viewpoint of how I was going to go with it, and just show you the little borders a little more. Like those are it's supposed to be kind of like roses. I'll work on the border a little bit different, but again, I was trying to do something where it doesn't look so, it just looks more, I don't know if I like necessarily like this border, but I need to figure out something so that there is some sort of border to this, just something more unique. Um, when I was kind of putting it together, I kind of realized, if I do it in a certain way, the way I've got it kind of set up, ideally it makes character creation go quite quickly, and you could also really just kind of create your character the way you want to create them, and not necessarily worry about XP. Now I don't know how good that's going to be. Maybe this is more of a one-shot style kind of game that I'm designing, or if this is something that's can be really epic. I'm not really sure how I'm gonna go about this. But it's the way I've kind of designed. I've designed a few other games before. Some didn't work very well. I've designed. I was really was trying to play the game of like the Highlander concept, and not a lot of people know this, but there really was a Highlander role-playing game, at least in concept. It was made by the same people who did the card game, which I think was I'm sorry, I'm just kind of losing my voice, but I think it was the card company was Thunder Castle or something like that, or they actually did create role-playing game for that, and I did test out, the role-playing game, and this was, I believe it was in 97, and they were supposed to come out with it in 96, but they weren't ready with it. So in 97, I was at Gen Con, and they did, design this game, and we got in there, me and my friends got in there, and I was very disappointed about what I saw. Basically, all they did was they had some really cheap character sheet that they had printed up on Excel, and the entire game was the card game. So basically, the character sheet allowed you. Sorry about that. My computer was starting to turn off. So basically, the character sheet allows you to create your deck, and then what they did was it was just live action, and if you wanted to actually do combat, you just played the cards. It was horrendous. Not one single person died in the entire game. And I remember someone was, when I was playing with them, I was battling them, and we were just talking back and forth, and he said that he was really disappointed because he thought this was gonna be a role-playing game. And I was like, yeah, me too. I thought it was gonna be a role-playing game. I can't believe they spent at least 2 years creating just a character sheet, and they were just reusing their card rules. And I was like, well, someone created a Highlander game. You can just look it up on the website, on the web, and someone just created a Highlander game using the White Wolf rules. And if you want to do that, you probably should do that. And I remember one of the judges was like, shushing me and telling me not to tell him that. But I was like, listen, you guys spent so long trying to create a game that this was nothing. It was a character sheet that you in live action. I don't know how they were ever expect to actually go anywhere with this. It was just absolutely insane. Not a single person in the entire game died, because it was harder to even die. Like at least with the card game, you could there's ways to win in the card game, but the only way to actually die in this game was you actually had to get a successful headshot. And these were sealed decks, so there wasn't a lot of strategy involved with these cards, and you had the option of leaving anytime you want. You can, like, I'm running away, and that chances are they got away, and so no one died in the entire game. And we must have had, oh geez, we must have had, like, it was over 20 people in here. We must have between 40 and 60 people in this room, and not a single person, like, through the whole game, not one person actually died. So after that, I realized that nobody was going to be coming out with, a Highlander style game. So I started designing one myself, and they didn't exactly work out. The players weren't really happy with it. They didn't really like it. I put a lot of time into it, but it didn't really work out. Now I know, if you go on the Mr. Gong site, he's got like that someone else had created a White Wolf game, which uses the new Rectangle, which actually comes out, pretty well. So I actually am quite impressed with that. No one's had, any really want to actually play that game. Yeah. Boy, I am sorry about this. I don't know what is going on. My computer just keeps turning off on me. So basically, I think I was talking about, like, the Highlander game that I was, playing in at Gen Con, and a few times I tried to create, the system too, because I just realized that, nobody was going to do it, so I just decided I was going to do it myself. And so I did a few different, ways about it. And the ultimate goal that I was trying to do was, I wanted to make it so that when you you just min-max your character. I want to try to avoid that. So what I was trying to do was create a system where every attribute works in combat. So if you just max in one, you make your others lower, and yes, you're having one devastating attack, but you're also lowering your toolbox, versus someone who just, did a little bit of has a little of everything. They may not be as powerful as your one single attack, but they have a lot more options and they're much more versatile. So that was what I was trying to do. And another thing was I didn't want to focus it solely off of combat. Um, and I had some players really hyped up for that, but it didn't exactly work out. I mean, it still kind of worked out to where, I mean, let's just face it, it was Highlander. Combat was just very important. So I mean, I remember after the end of that, like the character, one of the players, is he crumpled up his character sheet and tossed it away because he realizes this was much more combat oriented than I had originally described it. And part of that is just just the flaws of a storyteller. I could have made it much more social, but just it worked out where headhunting was just much more profitable for these characters than to just play a completely social game. And that just happened to be how it ended up going down. And one of the players wasn't happy with that. He pretty much stopped playing the game. So I tried different options. I did one where I took the White Wolf system, and I didn't tell the players this is what we were doing. We were just playing the game, and I just explained them we're all human, and then I just methodically just killed each player, and they were actually pissed. They were like, what the hell? And then I brought them back, and then they realized we were playing Highlander. In that instance, I definitely should have explained it to them earlier, but I wanted to be more of a surprise for them. The game just didn't work out. So using some of these from previous games that I've been doing, that's what I'm trying to go for, is where on this particular thing that I'm creating, where if you just min-max, all you're really doing, yes, you're creating something powerful, but all you're really doing is focusing on one style, where you're much more weaker in the others, and that is in fact lowering what you can actually do and what you're able to do. So that was kind of the forethought on this. I kind of like again the uniqueness that and it didn't take me that long. I mean, I tried. First of all, there's different things that I try to go for, and I think the character sheet is probably the most important piece to the game. I mean, that is really just the game itself, and everything that you do in the game should you should be able to go right off the character sheet. If not, then you're missing something, or you're making it just too complicated. And another thing I want to do is to simplify stuff. I always find game systems that are just a lot more simpler versus complicated. Just in my opinion, that's the style of games I like. Now I know when you go simplistic, it seems like you have less options. However, I found when you go simplistic, when the game system is much more simplistic, you have a lot more free actions. Now, you're a lot more free in your actions because it's much more has to do with your imagination. Versus just set options of attack. So I really think that going with a much more simpler game system would be much more enjoyable and would be much better versus something that is just extraordinarily complicated and uses just a lot of math involved. So, that's really my forethought on that. And it's just really just personal taste. I prefer more simpler games. I remember one time, I was in a game store. I was actually in a bookstore, and I'm going through books. I found some role playing books. So I'm like, oh, sweet. I pull out this book, called Cthulhu, and I was like, oh, okay, this is really cool. I opened it up to the character sheet, and I'm like, whoa, and I put that thing right back. I just when I saw the character sheet, I was like, that really just set the tone. Like, yeah, this is a serious freaking game. I mean, when I saw like half the character page was just based on insanity, I was like, wow, that. I mean, could they have done it in an easier form than to take up half the page just on this little chart, like a 1 to 100 chart. And I just was like, no, that's not even the game for me. But I always kind of regretted not really getting into Call of Cthulhu. So when I found that Savage World had a Call of Cthulhu, I was like, okay, sweet. Now I can get into that. I like the Savage World style system, and having a Call of Cthulhu style game, using the Savage World. I mean, yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. That's I'm much more comfortable playing Call of Cthulhu with the Savage World than versus playing Call of Cthulhu with their own system. And again, that's really with personal taste. Some people really like the complicatedness of it. I much prefer the simplicity of it because I feel that even as a player, I feel that I'm not restricted so much with the rules that I can, I'm able to role play them more within my actions. And I just found that they're just easier play. I mean, there is of course I do like some sort of level of complications, and I have played a game system where all you use is, like, I don't know what they're called, like jingle towers or something like that. It's like these little blocks, and you pull out the blocks. Now, I was at Gen Con when I was playing this, and pretty much the character sheet was pretty much just who you are. And um, the rule of the system was every action that you do, you have to pull out a block. Now, if you pull out a block and the tower falls, you die. If you pull out a block, you succeed. And so it was based on, okay, you're attacking this person. Okay, you pull out the block. Okay, you stab them, you kill them. If you make it fall, you die. If you could also knock down the blocks. You can just knock it down, and what that does is you still die, but whatever you were trying to do, you succeeded, and you do something like miraculous, like maybe like the party. You tell the party, I'll go, I'll give you guys cover, and the party runs off, and then they get away, but you end up getting killed. And so when the tower falls, then the tower gets restacked. So ideally, the idea is it gets easy in the beginning, but as the game progresses, it gets a lot harder. And we were playing this game for, geez, it was like we were doing this for 4 hours, and the entire time that block system has never fallen before. It never fell. And we were defying gravity with this thing. I mean, I can't believe, I've never played the Jingo set. I think that's what it's called, like Jingos or Django or whatever. I've never done that before. So I was a little worried. I was like, man, I'm going to knock this thing over, because there's definitely like a form of skill. Nobody in the table knocked this thing over. I mean, this thing was like, it was completely defying gravity. We were basically just playing this game we're playing this game for 4 hours. I don't know if you've ever, played this game, a Jingle Set game before, but a 4 hour long Jingle Set game. Now, it isn't constant because we are role playing, but anytime there was no dice involved whatsoever. And every combat action, we're pulling this thing out, and putting on, and we went through the entire game without knocking us over, and it really added that level of intensity to the game and the level of difficulty, um, to when we finally got to the head boss, because this thing, I mean, we were just gonna get smoked with this thing, and we're playing in this room, and this entire room is just filled with this one particular game, and we can hear the blocks just toppling all around us. And we were very careful about touching the table, moving the table, and anything like that. We were very careful, even breathing on this thing, and that kind of made it pretty fun. And that's honestly, that's about as simple as you can get. And I'm not really trying to do something of that simplistic. The one thing I would say, by doing a game like that, it was really made for a one-shot style story. I mean, I don't think they really had anything set up to do for like later on. I don't know if you gain any type of experience, or if you can gain experience. Maybe you gain equipment or something like that. I'm not really sure. But it was really more to do with like more of a one-style shot, style character game. And actually, now thinking about it, that would be kind of a cool way of doing maybe like a zombie apocalypse style game, where every time you have to face a zombie, you gotta pull out the block or something. So if you get swarmed by like 10 of these things, you gotta pull out for each one, and if you pull it out, you shot the zombie in the head. If you fail, then they tore you apart. So I guess that would be kind of cool. And I always kind of meant to kind of run something like that. But I don't know. I'm just, if you have basically, I just want to share this little character sheet thing with you guys. And I know I've been kind of ranting for a while, but if you guys have any suggestions or feedback that you want to share, or if you're like, no, this is just a piece of crap, or wow, you spent 2 hours in this, I can't believe this would take me like 10 seconds. Okay, well, thanks. If you have any type of feedback, if you think this is kind of a cool idea, if you got any real suggestions, or if you think this would be kind of fun to do, or where I should kind of move on with this, I don't know. I think I'm going to probably continue on with the rest of the character, maybe have some places for equipment, and then maybe later tonight actually maybe write down some actual rules to this thing. And again, I'm just trying to, with the rules, I'll just be more, just how to actually run, the character sheet. That's really based on the rules that I would do. And then with the skills, I would let that, create the world. So it would have a basically a world set, and then, okay, what type of skills would you need? So basically, again, if it's like a like a steampunk style world, like what would the skills, let the skills really emphasize on the world. If it's going to be more of a fantasy, maybe like a Final Fantasy style, think about, I don't know, I mean, I would have to, like, if I'm going to do like Final Fantasy 7, I would look at, okay, what would be like important? What are those little chickens, like chocos or whatever, have something to do with that, have like crazy ass weapons. And the equipment too is another thing that really defines the world as well. These are not only that, but also like when it comes to the classes. So classes, skills, and equipment really should help define the world that you're really playing in. So that's where basically I'm not going to let just that determine my world. I'm going to have my world set up, and then allow from the world, allow the skills to come in. I just don't want to. What I'm thinking is, you just don't want to just open up maybe your White Wolf book or your Dungeons & Dragons and just copy the skills listed in there. Like, for instance, those are designed for their world. Those are really based on like really when it comes to the die type. If you just copy from another game, what ends up happening is then you'll just have a long list of skills that are just worthless. And then for that one instance where the player, picked those, he's going to have points and stuff that's just not going to come into play, or it's going to actually change your world, and that's where you got to be important. So, for instance, you don't want to have something like, driving skill. If you're doing like kind of a Wild West. Now I know you can be more specific on driving. You can go more maybe horseback or carriage, or something like along that lines. But buffalo riding or something, but you want you if you put the skill in there, the players they're gonna utilize it, and these players could in fact change what you're trying to create. So when it comes to skills, I'm gonna have to really look and see what is the most dominant type of skills that would be functional in this world that I'm trying to create. And again, I'm probably allowing that to that would be based on the setting. And the same thing with equipment, so when it comes to the weapons and how that's another thing. When it comes to equipment, you got to be like, that's where you want it, like, how complicated do you want it to be? Like, I guess there's really no point in having just a medieval axe if you're kind of doing it like in a modern style game. If you're doing a modern style game, you want to really focus on like for instance, if you're doing a style like a Dirty Harry game, you want to really focus on just raw ass guns. You don't want to just fill it up with just unnecessary crap. I mean, sometimes it's great. I mean, it gives having unnecessary crap, creates options. So I mean, who's to say that someone couldn't run around in a Dirty Harry movie with a two-handed broadsword? I mean, well, all the players kind of decide that, but you just definitely don't want to make that the focus and spend too much time on that style. So I guess that's pretty much it for right now. So definitely, if you guys have any feedback, you got any suggestions, any instances how to do magic. I mean, that's a good point right here. I always like games that have magic. I played games where there was no magic involved, no whatsoever, no magic involved, and I never really liked those style games. I always like where they have the option. I mean, it could be that they're rare, but I always like that there is an option for a magic style system. So if you guys have any suggestions, and I'm then you please write in if you like this idea, if you don't like this idea, or whatever you want to do. Write in, give me definitely give me some feedback on this. If this looks interesting, doesn't look interesting, if anything like that. I tried to make this as unique as I possibly can, and it's kind of coming. I don't know. It's I can see it kind of really forming. But it's really going to have to be based on too the dice rolling is going to be pretty important, and how I'm going to want to do dice rolling. Now, my personal favorite when it comes to dice rolling, I like really using percentile style dice, using a 210 style. That's really more my favorite. But there isn't a lot of systems where that could be really useful. So, I mean, I guess I could do it like that. I mean, I guess I could just, instead of having it like D4, D6, D8, I could do it by tiers, and depending on how many tiers you have, I could create a chart. So if you have like 5 tiers in a certain area, or you got 4 tiers, it's a lot easier to make that roll. Maybe versus if you just have 1 tier. I mean, that's actually kind of a cool idea too. I'd have to create a complete chart with that. And again, I want to make this as simplistic as I possibly can. But a chart would kind of work kind of good too, and then I wouldn't even really have to worry about like dice. I just based on how strong you are in that specific area, and the skills can actually maybe raise on that chart. So for instance, but when based on that type of skill. So what it would be like like if you're punching someone, you would just, I don't know, go off of physique. You would, hit someone on the chart of physique, and let's say you got it at 3, you have physique at 3, so you would go off the third chart, and depending on what you rolled, so you would go off the third chart, you would go down, and it would be based on what you rolled, and the skills can actually maybe move that over some. So actually, now thinking that sounds actually kind of cool too, and then I don't really have to worry about dice, and then the dice would be exactly, it would be using percentile, so it would be going from 1 to 100. Kind of similar to very similar to the way that Marvel TSR did theirs. In fact, they even, their talent system was very similar to just what I just explained. That's how their talents work. They actually move their physical, abilities. Now, I would have to figure out a different way to do like damage. How would the damage work on this? But actually, now as I'm kind of talking about, I almost kind of like the idea of a chart, and then not having to worry about using all the different tiles of dice, and just really just focusing on 2 dice, 2 tens, and have it go 1 to 100. So, at this point in time, I'll explain. Later on, I'll show you what I've got. But definitely, I'm looking for any type of feedback, that you've got. If you like the idea, if you don't like the idea, if you got a better way of doing this. Again, here's what the character sheet looks like. Kind of scribbled all over it. And this is what I got so far. I know there isn't a lot here, but I've definitely got some a template in which I can work with. So I think this is a good, at least a good start. Yeah, please write in any type of feedback. And I can see that I've rambled on for quite a bit. So if you did watch this entire video, well, thank you for taking your time to listen to this ramble. So at this point in time, this is just Local Diablo reminding you of the devil's in the details. Thank you. Well, Webb, it looks like I ended it too soon, because as soon as I got done recording this, I was playing around with this a little more, and just want to show you where I was at. So literally, I was kind of putting it together as I was doing the filming, and I came up with a different way of doing this. I was going to originally have different little pieces of the pie to represent a different form of dice. Now I've decided I'm just going to do more of a chart scale. So this is where I'm at. Now I first got to explain that this is going to look like crap, because as I was doing my notes, so I don't write on my master copy, I was putting it over right on my plastic. So it's going to kind of look like crap with that. And I wasn't really trying to spell anything correctly. I mean, I was just doing any type of real notes on this. So basically, this is where I'm at. And so this is going to be your character right here. So this is going to represent basically all your dice rolling that you're going to be doing, and this is your attribute. And each color is going to represent a different attribute. Now understand, this right here is actually purple, and I know they kind of look the same, but just on my camera, purple and blue look really same. So I probably should have picked a different color for the recording. But you can kind of see purple, blue. So so ideally these are actually 2 different colors, and this is actually supposed to be green, but it looks like a lighter blue. Or I don't know, maybe it does look like green on here. So the idea is each color is going to represent a different attribute, and how the attribute correlates with your character as a whole and what is more predominantly. So I'm probably gonna have to do something different up here, because before I was gonna do something where your strongest to your weakest attribute. Here I'll probably end up doing like a color key or something like that to explain it. So this is going to be basically what you're going to be rolling off of. On this side, this is going to be where your health is, you know, like your psyche, where your mental attacks, your physical attacks, your defense, and how that works. And this is going to be based on your speed, your movement, initiative, stuff like that. So, and then these are going to correlate with a different attribute on here. So it's all kind of really more equal, because you're going to have 4 different attributes. So it's going to be 4 different things, and depending on, if you really just focus on one thing, you're going to be much more weaker in others. So at the bottom here's the skills, and I'm just random skills that we use in role playing, and ideally that is going to add to your attribute roll. So like for instance, I got brawling right here. So, and that's going to be under red. So that's going to represent your physique. So as you're rolling to hit with your brawling, you basically take your attribute. You take your attribute, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you add 3 to it with your brawling. So it's going to come out of 7. So on the chart, you're going to go off of the 7 column, and that's going to help you. Ideally, the higher your chart is, the easier it is to get more severe attacks. Now the dice rolling is going to be percentile dice, so it's going to go from 1 to 100, and that's going to determine the degree of success or failure. And I could show you the chart right now. Pull that up. So let it kind of focus in. I gotta see what I'm doing. Alright, so basically this is just the chart. I didn't print this out, but as you can see up here is your, and I'm gonna have to fine tune this, but this is gonna have to come with just gameplay. Just get with my group and play it out. This is gonna be, now it's gonna look kind of similar to the TSR one. I didn't try to copy TSR, but it's kind of hard when doing these style of charts not to make it look similar. So this is basically just going to represent your failure. This is going to represent like your moderate, just a weak success, a regular success, a powerful success, and then your ultimate success, or like a critical, and then just a critical failure up here. And then over here is the actual dice roll, where it goes from 1 to 100, and the chart's going to get modified. Things are going to move around based on where I see the speed of the game is, and increasing that speed or lowering the speed of it, or just the degree of difficulty, to really see where people are putting their things down. So ideally, what would get raised with experience would be your actual skills in this right here. So this is going to be, these two things would modify. Ideally, this would not modify. This would actually stay the same, though over time or through injuries, these might actually move around. So that's pretty much basically where I'm at. Now I'm at the stage where I'm going to be actually writing this stuff down and playtesting it. So some of the things that I would like to change on here, just off of the character sheet, is I'm going to work on a different type of border. Put a different type of border on there. Probably use more of just a blank sheet with just the primaries. On the back, I'll probably put like more type of skills, weapons, maybe a little thing for a picture, a little history of your character. So just various little things that we use for role playing. Maybe have a little section for spells, and that's pretty much basically it. So the idea is kind of too is like, if we're just like, for instance, if it's more of a fantasy style like almost like a Dungeons and Dragons style. Like different races would have different attributes advantages. So it could be something like maybe like an orc gets like for every physical piece of the pie, it counts as 2. So, but then like they're capped at the other things as well. So, or the different varies of different things that I could do. Maybe every 2 counts as a 1, counts as additional 1. It would have to depend on like the just the how much I would like to move them from the human race, or I hate using the human race as a base race. I mean, I don't feel that it's true. I don't really feel that's true in nature. you know um but I kind of feel like you need to, because it's the race that is the most known and what you can compare weaknesses and strengths to. So that's pretty much where I'm at, and the rest of the things, it's going to take a little bit of time to do, because I'm going to have to do some play testing and some writing. So pretty much at this point, this is where basically I am. Please leave feedback. Tell me what you think. Any improvements you think I should do, or questions you might have on it. Just drop a line, drop a little message on there, or whatever, what you think. If it's if I explain it well enough, or more explaining, or if you don't think it would work, that, again, I haven't play tested any of this, so they very well could just be awful. But it's kind of coming together pretty well, so I'm kind of impressed with it. Yeah, if there's any more information, just drop a line. And at this point in time, this is just Local Diablo reminding you the devil's in the details. Thank you.